The palpable bony landmarks on the palmar aspect of the wrist are the pisiform, the hook of Hammett, the scaphoid tuberosity, the trapezial tuberosity, and the volar aspect of the radial styloid. It is easiest to start identifying the pisiform, which is at the ulnar end of the distal wrist crease. Pisiform can also be identified by the insertion of the flexor carpi ulnaris. The pisiform is not a true carpal bone, rather it is a sesamoid in the tendon of the flexor carpi ulnaris, and it is palmar to the plane of the other carpal bones. When we move from the pisiform radially along the distal wrist crease, at the junction of the distal wrist crease with the thenar crease, the bony prominence that we feel is the scaphoid tuberosity. Immediately distal to the scaphoid tuberosity is the trapezial tuberosity. We can differentiate between the scaphoid and the trapezial tuberosity by keeping our finger on the scaphoid tuberosity and doing radial and ulnar deviation. The scaphoid becomes more prominent in radial deviation and less prominent in ulnar deviation. The trapezial tuberosity, however, does not change in position with radial and ulnar deviation. As we move radially from the scaphoid tuberosity to the junction of the darker colored skin, we can feel the tendon of the abductor pollicis longus. Immediately proximal to this is a hollow, and proximal to that is a volar radial styloid. The last bony prominence is the hook of Hammett. It is difficult to feel the hook of Hammett and you need to palpate deeply. It is about 2 cm distal and radial to the pisiform on a line drawn from the pisiform to the second metacarpophalangeal joint. It can be felt in the depth by pressing hard over this line. The bony landmarks on the dorsum of the wrist are the ulnar head, the lister tubercle, the dorsum of the distal radius, the proximal pole of the scaphoid, the dorsal pole of the lunate, the triquetrum, and the scaphoid waist. The easiest bony prominence to identify in the dorsum of the wrist is the ulnar head. The lister tubercle helps give us a landmark to other bony prominences. It is on the distal end of the radius, and immediately beyond it is a hollow, and in that hollow one can palpate the scaphoid proximal pole. It is easier to palpate the scaphoid proximal pole, the wrist in slight flexion, as the scaphoid and the lunate descend into the scaphoid fossa and the lunate fossa of the radius. With flexion they come out and one can palpate the scaphoid proximal pole, and next to it the dorsal pole of the lunate and the intervening scapholunate ligament. In the anatomical snuff box formed by the tendon of the abductor pollicis longus on the radial side and the extensor pollicis longus on the ulnar side, in the depth of this one can feel the waist of the scaphoid. The ulnar head also provides the landmark for the dorsum of the triquetrum, which is again felt in slight flexion and ulnar deviation. The tendon on this side is the extensor carpi ulnaris.